What is going on, everybody? I am 444 Philly Fan Podcast with Tim Talks Philly. Unfortunately, we do have some not great news, obviously, for Phillies fans and Philadelphia sports fans. And Rhys Hoskins, if you haven't heard, tore his ACL yesterday, a week before the regular season. Just an awful thing to have happen right before the start of the season. It just sucks. Obviously, Rhys is a big clubhouse guy. He's a big bat. He's a big righty bat. And it just sucks to lose one of your leaders like that right before the season, especially when he was having such a good spring. It's not like he was having like a bad spring and then, you know, he tears his ACL. No, Rhys Hoskins has been a clubhouse guy. He's been a legitimate piece in the Phillies offense. He's one of the main reasons why Bryce Harper came to Philadelphia in the first place. Rhys Hoskins is just he's Philly. Like he when you think about the Philadelphia Phillies, Rhys Hoskins' name does come up, even with all the superstars around him. And it just sucks to see that Rhys Hoskins is probably maybe done for the season.
Listen, something bad had to happen. Too much good was happening. We went on an absolute tear in the World Baseball Classic. Philly seemed to be carrying USA to a potential championship there. And everything else was going great back in Clearwater. Sosa was looking great. Hoskins tearing the cover off the ball. Just 4 home runs, I believe he was at. Hall looking really good. Just so much promise was coming out of this team. Great news from, the Bryce Harper camp. Everyone thinking that he's probably going to be back a little bit earlier than expected. And then this happens, kind of just an awkward turn going for a ground ball. And this is the kind of stuff that happens. We've seen a couple big names go down so far, whether it's been in spring training or in the World Baseball Classic, and you hate to see it. But yeah, this team is incredibly deep, and we'll get into how we think the loss is going to affect our overall projections here. But take away just the talent on the field. This guy was so important in the clubhouse. We've already heard Trey come out and talk about it. He was on WIP this morning. Everybody knows that this guy is so important to the culture that's been being built down in Clearwater. And this is something that's going to sting for a little bit. And it's a shame he was in a contract year. Started off spring really, really well, batting 375, 1300 OPS. I mean, this guy was going into a contract year playing well and was hoping to bounce back from a disappointing end to that World Series there. And it's a shame not being able to see him even start off the regular season.
Yeah, it really does just suck. Like there's really no other way to put it. I mean, Rhys Hoskins, as we both just said, big piece in this clubhouse, and what they're doing down in Clearwater, and then what they do in the regular season. I mean, there's nothing better than a Rhys Hoskins, pimp shot. Basically, I mean, when Rhys Hoskins hits a home run, and you're taking 30 home runs plus out of the lineup with around 70 to 80 RBIs as well. It's not going to be easy, especially when you're going to replace a guy on his contract year. Everybody in pro sports plays with a little chip on their shoulder when it is their contract year, especially like a guy like Rhys. He's 30 years old. You know, he hasn't gotten the Trey Turner, even the Kyle Schwarber money contract. He has a big mate in Scott Boras, and you knew that Rhys Hoskins was going to find money somewhere, whether it was here or whether it was somewhere else. You knew that Rhys Hoskins, especially with the DH added in both leagues, was going to find a home somewhere, whether that be wherever, AL, NL. It was definitely going to be somewhere. And it makes you wonder, does Rhys Hoskins come back for another year and contract one on a 1 year deal, prove it, see if you could stay healthy, because he did just have surgery on his knee before this ACL injury. So it definitely makes you wonder, does Rhys Hoskins return for another year? Because if that's the way that we see Rhys Hoskins' tenure end in Philadelphia, that's a terrible way to end. And that's a terrible way for fans to see how a guy like Rhys Hoskins might never ever be in a Phillies uniform again.
It's an absolute shame. I mean, hearing him talk about what that playoff run meant to him and how he's been seeing all these great things down in Clearwater. They would always have pictures of the bank during those playoff runs, and he just wanted to get there. He wanted to feel that. He finally got a taste of it, which at least we could sit back and say that. But yeah, he was so excited for all that and then ready to try and go back. Hey, there was there's been so much talk about him coming back before this. It was such a controversial talking point after his defensive performance in the World Series. And I think the reaction from this injury shows that people people were really kind of undervaluing him when that whole thing was going on in the World Series. So many people wanted him gone. They said, "Don't bring him back. He's not worth it." But then he goes down here, and it's a wow. Like, this sucks. This is going to hurt us. So, in my honest opinion, I think if anything, this probably gives him a better chance to be back in Philly next season as compared to if he went out and balled like I expected him to, because I think we have pieces to replace him. Whether it's putting Derek Hall at first base, who I've been incredibly high on since the start of spring, whether it's putting Alec Boehm at first base and maybe sliding Sosa into third. There's options for the future, but if one of these guys don't pan out, I'm sure Rhys Hoskins is not going to be able to find a great deal coming off of two surgeries, both to the knee. So it's going to be very interesting to see, but I think it all depends on how the people who have to step up you know, in place of him perform this summer.
Yeah, and look, obviously, for some reason, Rob Thompson calls up Derek Hall in the middle of last season, and me, I had no idea who Derek Hall was. I was actually at the game, and he puts him in the cleanup spot, and obviously they have trust in Derek Hall. And look, this spring he has been amazing. I mean, it's really nothing short of that. He couldn't hit lefties. He can now hit lefties. He can hit, obviously, the long ball Hall. And he doesn't get the nickname for hitting singles. So I guess the main question is, should and are you comfortable with Derek Hall being your everyday first baseman for a team that just went to the World Series, who is now missing a huge piece in the clubhouse? 30 home runs, 80 plus RBIs. Obviously, I do not believe that I don't think that Derek Hall can get 30 home runs. I just he could. I mean, he would have to go on a little bit of a tear, but I'm not going to deny the fact that this guy isn't talented. He was put onto the playoff rosters multiple times. He was brought up in the middle of a playoff push. So, and look, Rob Thompson did something last year that Charlie Manuel was the last to do, and that was bring this Phillies team to a World Series. So I'm going to trust Rob Thompson, and I'm going to trust everybody else. Kevin Long is obviously, getting guys right with their swings, and you know, you could even see it this year with the lefties. Just even in Clearwater, a guy doesn't go from being absolutely unplayable against lefties to now hitting, what was it, 333 against lefties this spring. So when you look at it like that, I'm okay with it. Obviously, in the beginning, if something happens, if there's a little bit of a bump in the road, we have Dave Dombrowski. He's going to do something to make this team available to be in the World Series, to win a championship, because that's the ultimate goal, and that's really what John Middleton, Dombrowski, they've been pushing that to the fans all off season.
Hey, it's half the sample size, but in 15 at bats against lefties, he has 3 walks and is batting 333. In about 35 at bats against righties, he's batting 319. So only 15 at bats. Don't go crazy. But anyone who's sitting here and their first argument for not putting Derek Hall in at first base is because he can't hit lefties, go check out who the Philadelphia Phillies hitting coach is, because he has turned around so many careers, and what he's been doing with Derek Hall is remarkable. just hearing Derek Hall talk and how confident he is. He said going into last year, he was focusing on how to approach hitting righties, his pitch selection, his vision. He was working on all those things. He even said he was a much better lefty hitter in the minors, but since he was focusing so much on how he approached right-handed pitchers, he just started seeing a decrease in success against lefties. Now he's putting the work back in. He's confident against righties, and he is putting together good at bats against lefties. I mean, 15 at bats, technically 18 at bats there if you include those 3 walks, only 3 strikeouts. I mean, that's huge from a lefty who is primarily in there to just swing for the fences. And you mentioned earlier, Charlie Manuel being able to get this team to the World Series. That's a guy who is incredibly high on Derek Hall. So I have a lot of faith in this guy. I don't know if you want to sit here and say you're comfortable with him at first base going into the season because you are a team that's expected to try and get back to the World Series. But I see absolutely no reason to not give this guy a shot starting opening day. I've been meaning to check to see who we're going to be going up against that first game since the starters have been officially posted for opening day. But Derek Hall has shown that, hey, you don't even necessarily need to give him a day off against against lefties because he's putting together good at bats. Now, I mentioned the 3 walks, which I'm impressed at that progress he's been able to make. But something you're going to miss a lot losing Rhys Hoskins is the at-bats he's typically able to put together. This was a guy who was not your prototypical 2-hole hitter, but we were confident putting him up there because he was going to see pitches and he was going to work walks. So as much as I think Hall can come in and still be a very successful, first base power bat, I think you're going to miss that aspect of Rhys's game a lot if this is who you end up sliding in there. But ultimately, I have so much confidence in Derek Hall. Everyone I talk to about it seems like they're in the he needs to show me more phase. I've seen a guy who's so incredibly confident at the plate during the spring. So I'm incredibly confident putting him out there on opening day.
Yeah, it is DeGrom, by the way. They did announce that today. So that's fun.
So we'll be going against, we'll have him for a solid 3 innings, and then I guess we'll probably find out who we'll likely be seeing out of the pen.
Yeah, probably. But who knows with the Rangers? I mean, I don't know. At least we've seen the guy before. Not like we could hit off him, but we've seen him. But yeah, like you said, the Rhys Hoskins at bats. I mean, the ability for a first baseman like him to draw walks as well as he has in his career, the eye that he has, and look, I like Rhys Hoskins is a love-hate guy in this city. There's always one of them on every team. There's a love-hate relationship with an athlete. And Rhys Hoskins, I feel like, was one of those guys, especially with the World Series, not being able to field a ground ball or whatever. But you don't get to the World Series without Rhys Hoskins. I mean, there was a legitimate debate that if Bryce Harper doesn't hit that home run in Game 5, and it's like a single or a double, and JT scores, we go into extras, whatever happens, Rhys Hoskins could easily have been the NLCS MVP. Easily. He hit 2 home runs in Game 4. He hits a home run in Game 5 to put us up. I mean, he's a veteran at this point. I mean, the guy came in on a tear. In his rookie year, he came in on a tear, obviously. We all remember that. But it actually put some excitement back in the Phillies baseball when they did call up Rhys Hoskins. And like I've been saying, Rhys Hoskins' ability to hit the long ball as well as he has in his career, and that's something that will be missed. That's really just taking it's hard to really think about it, but like Giancarlo Stanton, you take him off the Yankees, you're missing 30 home runs, 80 RBIs. That's kind of what it is with Rhys Hoskins, except he's your first baseman, and instead of having Giancarlo in your DH spot, you can plug somebody in because they don't need to field anyways. Well, now you have Derek Hall needing to play first base, or Bone, or Cody Clemens. I think is a long shot, but obviously that name's going to be brought up a little bit. We just made a trade for him, and then there will also be we need to go get a veteran guy like CJ Cron, Christian Walker, like guys like that on bad teams. We need to bring them in here right away. The people that panic. And look, obviously when you lose a guy like Rhys Hoskins, there is a little bit of panic around, especially a week, 6 days before the season starts. But for the first few series of games, Derek Hall being your first baseman is not going to be the end of it all. Like it's a test. A meaningless game in April is not going to do a lot for your schedule at the very end of the year. So it's a test for Derek Hall, and I'm excited to see, if he brings what he's brought to spring training into the lineup opening day, because we're going to need it.
Yeah, you mentioned the hit against the Braves, and this is the path I kind of thought you were going at when you were mentioning that Bryce Harper home run. If Bryce Harper doesn't hit home run, I don't think there's much debate that home run against the Braves from Hoskins is the best, probably the top moment of that playoff run. I mean, the bat spike, the whole thing. Derek Hall, yes, he can go in that moment and maybe hit that home run. But the energy that brought could not be matched. And it's what I talked about earlier when it came down to what he means in the locker room, in the clubhouse. I mean, this is someone who we're gonna miss him a lot on the field, of course. 30 home run guy, like you mentioned. But I think you're going to see a huge impact from how these guys kind of, walk around, approach everything. I don't imagine he's not going to be around, though. He was so important to this team. I'm sure you're going to see him in the dugout all the time. So that'll help. But, yeah, I think when you talk about moving on from him and getting into who's going to take his place, I really think the Phillies want to find that spot from within. They have a lot of options, obviously. We've talked about Derek Hall. We can talk about Alec Boehm sliding over to first base. We could talk about Sosa coming in, maybe being put into that third base spot or going into the DH while Hall takes over. So they definitely want to find the solution internally, and I think they have the ability to do that, especially with so many guys performing really, really well in spring. But there's always that option to go out and look for somebody else. I don't think that's going to be what they do until potentially maybe like a deadline move. It's just so hard to find a team before the season starts that says, hey, we know we're out of contention. Let me sell you one of our better first basemen for a bag of chips. So I think they're going to ride with what we have right now. And personally, I think they're going to see a lot of success with it. But they're going to ride with what we have until they prove it can't get us into the World Series and go through a good playoff run. So I'm not as much looking at those outside sources, which is kind of crazy to say when you lose a guy like Rhys Hoskins. Typically, that's the first thought. But I'm looking at these guys like Derek Hall, like Edmundo Sosa, like Alec Boehm. I mentioned a few pods earlier that it would be incredibly hard with how well Sosa's been playing to not see him as a starter this year. And not the way I would have preferred it to be, but we're going to get to see that a lot. And I'm excited to see how these young guys step up. We don't necessarily see Sosa as a long-term like replacement at third base, say maybe if you move Alec Boehm to first. But that's just because we traded him for nothing. He came in on having a really bad year. But he's looking really well. He's batting over 500 in spring. I mean, this guy is absolutely insane right now. And I'm incredibly confident in his ability to, not bat 450 during the year, but bat maybe 290s, maybe meet that 300 peak and put together a really good clinic over there at third base. So I think they're going to look internally to solve this, and it's going to be with a rotation of Hall, Boehm, and Sosa. So that's kind of my next question, my next point. I wanted to kind of get your read on what you think the best lineup is there, because I think it's pretty solidified that it's going to be these three guys to start the year that they're going to cycle within third base, first base, DH. But what do you think is the kind of best alignment for what these guys offer defensively?
I mean, obviously, Sosa, probably the best defensive player, easily, out of the three. Um, you have a spot open, I guess, at DH. It really depends on what you want to do with Boehm. Do you start him in the DH spot? Sosa at third, Hall at first? Do you have Hall in DH? Bohm at first, Sosa at third? Do you have Schwarber or Castellanos at the DH spot with Caven in the outfield? There's a lot of different like. It's nice that we actually have backups that I'm comfortable with putting out there on a nightly basis. Obviously, you want Harper and Hoskins, but we don't have that right now, so we got to work with what we have. And I think in the beginning of the year, they'll probably start off with Sosa in each, even though he's probably the best defender. Have Hall and Bohm, you know, out there just to see if they can actually defend at their positions. Because if one of them is struggling in the field, well, okay, then you move the other guy over and the other guy to DH. Then you move Sosa over to third. Like it's not out of like it's not impossible to really make this decision. It's really just who's hot, who's not, who can field a ground ball, who can make a throw to first base, and I mean that's really what it is. But I'm not opposed to having Bohm at first. It really just Derek Hall is obviously the biggest piece in what is going to happen at this point. And if he's struggling at first base with his fielding, or even if he's struggling with his hitting, you could put Bohm at first, and I wouldn't be mad. You could put Sosa, and I wouldn't be mad. Bohm, Hall, DH. It really just, I think it will depend on matchups and if the players are hot or cold. But I think in the beginning of the year, first game, next Thursday, 6 days from now, Hall will be your first baseman, Bohm will be your third baseman, Sosa will be your DH.
Yeah, it's a really tricky question because I think you can line them up really any way you want to and be able to go out and win a game. So I
Yeah.
don't think that's the angle I'm looking at with this. It's truly what is going to be the future of your baseball team? Are you going to have Alec Boehm slide over and be your future first baseman? Or would you rather keep him over at third if there might be better external options that you can bring in and be your future first baseman? So I think there's more of a futuristic view to this question, but I think Boehm has done a really good job defending that bag over at third. So if you think you have a better chance at maybe bringing in a good option at first base next year, or there's a guy like Derek Hall who you really think could come over and be that future first baseman, keep him over at third. Don't mess with the whole DH spot. Honestly, like when Bryce Harper comes back, one of these outfielders is going to be DH. Either Bryce Harper is going to be there while he's still recovering his arm in the beginning, or when he gets healthy, one of these guys who they don't want to see run around in the outfield is going to come in and play DH. I don't think you're really tinkering with the idea of Alec Boehm not having to play the field. So it's gonna. They said he hasn't been taking a lot of reps at first base. When Alec Boehm was asked about it, he said no, like I'm just grinding over here at third, really working on my game, and you can tell because he's doing really well. But again, when you play Sosa, he is so valuable to you. Even though I'm really proud of what Alec Boehm's been able to do defensively, especially with the kind of mental hiccup that has come with that. But there's no doubt that Sosa is better defensively. So yeah, there's going to be games maybe they want to get Stott off his feet and they put Sosa at second, or Turner off his feet, they'll put Sosa at short. But there's going to be a lot of games where you're going to want to put Sosa in there at third because he's just better defensively. But if Alec Boehm is your future third baseman, I want to see him getting more reps at third just because you've already saw what the experience has been able to do for him and how much he's improved. So like I said in the beginning of it, any way you line these guys up, you're going to be able to go out and win a ball game, and I'm going to be pretty confident you're not going to have any defensive issues, or at least any glaring defensive issues. But this decision is more than, hey, what gives us the best chance to win today and, random game in June. But it's going to come down to where are we going to be lining these players up in the future, because we know we don't want to be throwing them back and forth between two different positions and mess with their heads like that.
Yeah. So to go back on that, then I'll answer the future question. If it was me, I would just leave Bohm at third. I mean, I do not need another Scott Kingery on this team where And obviously Kingery was never the hitter, except for that one June in like 2019. He was never the hitter that Bohm is. But you saw how bad Bohm was his sophomore season. He was awful. And he got sent down. And obviously, that was probably some part due to Girardi being the manager. But I would leave Bohm at third. I don't want to mess with what he brings to that plate. He can hit it every way possible. He can apparently now, we hope, hit for power. And if you're costing me 10 home runs because you move a guy over to first base, even if it's not this year, in a few years, no. Like, leave Bohm where he's comfortable. He's obviously worked a lot on his game at third defensively because he's been a very solid defender all spring long. And you could tell he's really been working on it. You could tell he's really been working on his swing, his power, all that. We saw that he added 15 pounds. So to shorten it up, leave Bohm at third, have Hall be your first baseman, and then if you want to platoon Sosa in for a game or so, I'm not, that's not going to do anything for Bohm. So I think Sosa is your ultimate utility guy right now that can play any part of the infield except first base, and you play him how hot his bat is, but you leave Bohm at third ultimately for now and the future.
Yeah, so and I mentioned with that, it comes down to what do you have internally versus what will you be able to bring in from free agents going into next season. For the first base free agent class, there's not much. I mean, Rhys Hoskins is your youngest available option, so there's some talent there for sure. But if you keep Alec Bohm at third base, you're telling yourself, hey, Derek Hall is going to be our future first baseman, unless you trade for somebody because hey, there's not many options out there. Third base, you got a guy like Chapman who should be becoming available, so you could bring him in. You're gonna have to pay him a bag, but I think they're gonna see a lot of success from Edmundo Sosa at third base. So I think what they should do is switch Alec Bohm over. It sucks to say with how well he's playing, but Alec Bohm at first base is going to give you the best chance moving forward because even though I'm incredibly high on Derek Hall, I think what we're seeing right now from Edmundo Sosa is real. I think this guy has a chance to be an electric third baseman. Now, he's not going to be this, kind of power bat from the corner that we're typically used to seeing, but he's I honestly, Trey Turner might all of a sudden be a great power bat from shortstop. Edmundo Sosa is going to get you a bat that you would typically be expecting from your shortstop. So they're kind of just reversing roles there. But I think that kind of lines you up for the future pretty well. I don't think it's what they're going to do on opening day, but I wouldn't mind them lining up Bohm at first base, Sosa at third, and Derek Hall at DH for the majority of that part where Harper's out to start the season, just because I look at what their options are going to be moving forward, and I don't like what's available at first base. So if Bohm's showing that he can drive the ball and he can add that power to his game and turn into a 25, 30 home run a year kind of guy, I think he's a comfortable solution over at first base.
Yeah, I mean, look, not many times we disagree with what we're both saying, but like I see both sides. I can see why some people would want him to stay at third, and I think it's because mentally, and I think it's honestly because of the whole Kingery experiment. I think that truly messed with a lot of Philly fans' heads and saying, "Well, this guy was supposed to be your next blank, Utley, whatever you want to call him. He was supposed to be the next guy, and you put him in center field. He sucked. It messed with his hitting." And now the guy hasn't seen the Phillies roster in years. He played for like a week and didn't even sniff the field. So I think that definitely has like a little bit of real estate in the back of my head at least, where if you move Bohm, oh, it might mess with his head. But look, we've seen Bohm come back from adversity before, and we've seen him really step up. You know, We saw the guy say he hates the place to hitting a home run in the World Series back to back. So we've seen this happen, and we've seen it work, and we've seen it not work. I just want to win.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm going to say. So if Bohm is comfortable playing first, go right ahead.
Well,
But if he's not,
something I'll counter your last point with. You mentioned the whole Scott Kingery thing. Oh yeah, because he was supposed to be your future second baseman, but in order for him to get playing time, they were throwing him over in center field. If you ask the average Philly fan, the average person in that organization, they probably would have told you before we really got to see him in the field that Alec Bohm was your future first baseman. No one
yeah,
expected him to be able to take the leap that was necessary to play a good third base. So that's why this is so interesting, because he's kind of created that from his improved play. Other than that, it would have been, hey, yeah, we're expecting Rhys Hoskins to move on. We're obviously bringing in so much talent that we're going to have to watch where we spend our money a little bit. And Rhys Hoskins, his streakiness is just not going to be worth the money you're going to have to give him, even though I really liked what he did last year, and especially in that playoff run. But everyone would have told you that Alec Bohm was going to be the first baseman. So when talking about messing with these guys' heads and, oh, they were coming in and they were supposed to be this, technically speaking, everyone was expecting him to be our first baseman. So that's the only reason why it doesn't mess with me too much to say that. It just came down to, hey, he's just doing a hell of a job over there at third base. So it's kind of tough timing to say, hey, you're doing really, really well over there, but now you're our future first baseman. So that's just the only thing I would think about there is, yeah, you're right. A lot of Phillies fans are kind of afraid of that idea because of Scott Kingery, but I don't think it would be an issue for Alec Bohm because it's not like he's going from infield to outfield. He's just switching over to the position that we ultimately thought he was going to find his way over to anyway. So I think if they end up making that move, it's not going to mess with his head too much. It's even though it's a new position, it's an easier position in terms of, he's only really going to have to make the play with his glove. He's not going to have to worry about getting up and throwing as much, which obviously that was his issue in the 3-error game against the Mets. So I'm not too worried about having to slide him over. I think he would translate really well.
yeah. I mean, look, we'll have to wait and see. I definitely will give him looks at first, just as many as maybe not as many as Hall, but they'll definitely give him looks, and they'll definitely ask him if he's comfortable. And if Bohm is comfortable with it, he's a professional athlete, so I'm gonna trust him over what I think. I don't get paid millions of dollars to talk about a guy, maybe playing first base. You're right. Like, he was supposed to be our first baseman. Everybody knew, or everybody thought that Alec Bohm was going to come in after being drafted, play third a little bit, and then move over to first base once Rhys Hoskins' contract expired. Well, now we are at the point of where we're a year early from that. Rhys Hoskins is now injured, but you might have found a diamond in the rough in Derek Hall. But you also have another one out there, like Edmundo Sosa, who, in both of our opinions, obviously, you want to see as much as possible because he's been lighting it up in spring. He found a little spark here in Philadelphia at the very end of last season. And, if he hits that ball 3 feet a little bit to the left, we could be world champions. So, and that would be all thanks to Edmundo Sosa. But, I'm big on Bohm. I really am. And this season, I want Bohm to succeed as much as possible. I want to see him break 20 home runs minimum. I want to see him, hit for power, hit around the ballpark, hit it the opposite way, hit it. I just want to see Bohm succeed. I hated watching Bohm his sophomore year. He looked uninterested. He looked miserable out there. And when he bats, 368 his rookie year? Yeah, in a shortened season, he still batted over 300. And I need that Alec Bohm. Even last year, he struggled a little bit. And then he came around and, now it just looks like Bohm is full of confidence. And it's nice to see one of our, we're not the Braves. We don't produce Acuñas and Albies and Swansons. We don't produce these guys. We produce Hoskins and Bohm. And I need one of those guys to pan out and be a Ronald Acuna, maybe not to that extent, but maybe like an Ozzy Albies where he's an all-star consecutively every single year. He's one of the best players in the sport at their position, and that's what I want Alec Boehm to be. And I'm big on him. I think him and Castellanos are the two guys that I'm truly, you know, bucking down and really going to defend with my whole body. And just, I hope they prove me right.
Yeah. And those are two players that are expected to take a big jump. But with that, there's a lot of question where you're going to line them up in the offense. I mean, and even losing Hoskins, that it's an absolute twist up on where you place these guys. I really liked Hall at the 4 if he was coming in and DHing, but Hoskins was an option there. So losing him and now inserting a definite of Hall and Sosa, where do you kind of see this lineup shaking up in terms of the order?
Like you said, I liked Hall at 4 as well. Now that you're missing Hoskins at probably would have been your 4 or 5 ish, maybe. I mean, look, now you're adding a lefty bat, which you wouldn't have had in the beginning of the season, anyways. So now you're adding a lefty bat, so that now you can play around a little bit more up top than you could. Obviously, Trey Turner's your leadoff. I don't care that Mark DeRosa had him in the 9, or I don't know. Trey
Best
Turner's your
manager in
number.
the world.
Yeah. Schwartz 2, in my opinion. And then honestly, I'm putting Bone 3. Bone 3, Hall 4, JT 5, Castellanos 6, and then probably Dot Sosa Marsh.
Yep, it's exactly what I have. I
So
think if you, it's sad to say, but I think like I'm more confident about this lineup in terms of like the structure of it than almost any lineup where I had Rhys Hoskins in. Just because like there's so many of the same kind of hitter that when you're trying to put them in an order, it's not all right. Who's in the best spot for this team to succeed? It's where am I putting these players so they don't get in their own head. Castellanos couldn't drop down to 7, 8, 9 because it would everyone would worry that his mental, the mental factor would kind of take over and he would start to lose confidence. So now without Hoskins, I think that lineup shapes out pretty good. I have it exactly how you read it. And listen, if you wanted to flop Bohm and Real Muto, I wouldn't mind that. I think
yeah,
Bohm is showing that he is developing a lot of power. But guess who you typically have in that 3 spot? Bryce Harper. And I think that guy's got a good amount of power. So I really like Bohm in the 3. I think JT has shown that in his second half that of last year that he can still ball. But I'm more right now. I might be more confident in Alec Boehm going into the season, even though I've really liked what I've seen from JT in spring and in the World Baseball Classic. He had one of those sneaky good tournaments. Didn't put the ball out of the park, but just was roping doubles, putting the ball in play, working good at bats. So I've liked what I've seen from him so far. So I think that's how the order rolls, though. It's kind of falling into place, and it would be interesting now to see where that lineup works with Bryce Harper coming back. And what's going to factor into that is which one of these guys between Sosa and Hall takes that step forward and puts together a good first half of the season. But I think what you read off is the exact lineup they should be going with on opening day, especially since they are facing a lefty, but facing a righty in DeGrom. But Derek Hall probably would have been seeing the field anyway. So I really like the
yeah,
righty lefty splits there. I mean, you're going righty, lefty, righty, lefty, righty, righty, lefty, righty, lefty. I mean, you could not come up with a better righty lefty split there with Hoskins in the lineup. It was just you had at least one point where you were putting 4 righties in a row, and it got really, really difficult. And you almost wanted to put Stott and Marsh back to back because you didn't want to slide one of these big names down into that 8 hole. But I think you could be incredibly comfortable sliding Sosa into that 8. So I think it helps in terms of just structuring the lineup. I don't think the lineup's better without Rhys Hoskins, obviously, but I think in terms of setting your lineup, it got a lot easier without Hoskins in the lineup.
Yeah, definitely with the splits. And it's so weird because yesterday we literally probably saw what was going to be that opening day lineup, probably in the order. I I didn't watch any of the game. I saw obviously the Hoskins injury, but I was doing other stuff. But yeah, that lineup seems good to me, and that
I
was
think
off the top of my head.
Yeah, I
So
think Rob needs to listen to the pod because if they roll out with something other than this, I'm going to be incredibly disappointed. Because look, I think one of Rob Thompson's biggest, you know, one of his best attributes has been his ability to let the young guys play and the young guys be who they are. And he doesn't care, how much experience you have. He's going to put you in the lineup where he thinks you will be best. That's why Derek Hall was batting 4 in his first start. So I think the only way Bohm isn't above both JT and Castellanos is if Rob Thompson's valuing regular season success over what he's seen just this spring. But I'm going to be incredibly disappointed if I see Alec Bohm behind Castellanos because from what unfortunately we're now seeing towards the tail end of this spring, Castellanos isn't going to be getting on base a whole lot for Alec Bohm. So I like Bohm in that 3 spot, and I'm hoping Rob sees that too.
yeah, and man, do I really just hope Castellanos figures it out? Like seriously, like I don't like we don't need to have a whole conversation about this, but like Castellanos, especially with no Hoskins, I mean,
Needs
he's
to
the
step up.
key. I mean, you need him. I don't need him to have a 2021 season. I don't need him to bat 309 with 30 whatever home runs and 100 RBIs. I don't need him to do that. But I need him to get more than 13 home runs and 56
Yeah.
RBIs.
Mm-hmm.
I can't have him do that. We gave him more money than we did Schwarber.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously with Schwarber and Turner and JT, you know what you have in those guys. Even if they start the season, even if Schwarber and JT start the season off a little bit slow like they did last year, well, now you have Trey Turner. So there you go.
Which, watching that World Baseball Classic, it does not look like they're going to be starting out slow.
No, I mean they were literally the only ones to do anything.
I mean, we might see back-to-back home runs to start the season. I'm not going to sit here and predict anything, but if you're at the bank and you're still conscious, because I know I'm going to be tailgating pretty hard. You're going to see some explosives. I think this lineup's really going to pop off, especially coming back to the bank for the first time since the World Series.
Against the Cincinnati Reds too.
Yeah, right. Like, come on, like, give me a
Like
sweep.
this is disrespectful.
Yeah, I'll bring my broom to every game.
Yeah, seriously.
But
We start.
I don't
the
know what
Reds
other. I don't know. Yeah, right. I don't know what other points you had. I had a few World Baseball Classic takes. If you didn't have anything else left on the Phillies.
Yeah, you can definitely put your takes out there, and then I can talk about them because obviously there was a lot of good things that Phillies fans saw during that World Baseball Classic with
Mm-hmm.
Trey Turner, Schwarber, and all them guys. So
Yeah, but the World Baseball Classic has been getting a lot of heat for many different reasons, and one of the most frustrating things that I've been hearing from it were when talking about players getting hurt, everyone would say there's no reason these players should be playing meaningless games because they, have a chance of getting hurt. These are not meaningless games. Yes, maybe for the United States, for people who have all these sports to watch, you got 4 or 5 different sports you're tuning into throughout the year, and you could tell just the way our fans would kind of react and our players would react after we would score. But watching these other countries and their fans celebrate I would see a ground out that would score a run and everyone was reacting in the crowd like it was a walk off. I mean, this is so good for the game of baseball, and I don't understand how people are sitting back and saying it is meaningless baseball. I can understand from a pitcher's perspective, which I will end up kind of addressing when I get to my other World Baseball Classic take, but in terms of hitters, there's no reason they should not be playing in this. Rhys Hoskins just got hurt in a spring training game by going to his left for a ground ball. Don't tell me that, these guys are getting hurt playing meaningless games. Rhys Hoskins got hurt playing a meaningless game, but you all want him to go out there because you want him to get ready for the regular season. I don't I don't understand it. This was such a cool tournament. It was so fun to tune into. Watching countries you didn't care about just go at it and get so fired up over the littlest things. It was such a cool experience, and it was so painful hearing so many people talking about how meaningless it was because I look at the faces of those fans. This was not meaningless for them. And I was incredibly intrigued by it. I had so much fun watching it. But yeah, players are gonna get hurt no matter what. If they're on a field, they're gonna get hurt, and just don't pretend that they're not going to be playing baseball if they're not in the World Baseball Classic. They're still going to be in Florida. They're still going to be over Arizona. They're going to be playing baseball. I would just prefer it to be more intense. Trey Turner came out and said in one of his post-game interviews, I haven't had a spring training home run in like 4 or 5 years. He just put together, like 5 during that tournament? Just absolutely insane. Like, it is an absolutely different energy for all these players who, Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, who don't get to experience what playoff baseball is like, what the World Series is like. They almost got something better. It was such an electric atmosphere, and it's awful that so many people are just against it because it's the World Cup of baseball, and it just comes down to baseball isn't as wide of a sport around the world, so it's not viewed as the same. But this was such a cool tournament, and I really think kind of the reaction you got from a lot of the players is going to cause it to grow when it comes back in 2026, they said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's confirmed too.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. But I'll kind of get your opinion on that before I run into my next team.
Trey Turner, look, if you're a Phillies fan, if you're not, if you're from America, what Trey Turner just did in the World Baseball Classic got me more hype for the season than anything he would have done in spring training. Castellanos and Schwarber went back-to-back last year in spring training. Castellanos didn't do a thing in the regular season. Trey Turner just put a country on his back and brought them to the World Baseball Classic Championship. He hits a grand slam against Venezuela, who was undefeated at the time, to put him up by 2 in the bottom of the 8th, top of the 8th, whatever it was. And he said it was one of the biggest home runs of my life. So you're going to tell me that if Trey Turner comes up in the top of, first of all, Trey Turner's not getting an at-bat in the top of the 8th in a spring training game. JT Realmuto isn't catching in the top of the 8th. Kyle Schwarber's not hitting. I mean, there's so many takeaways. And look, it might look like I'm biased. I'm not. The Phillies were just the only ones to literally do anything memorable for Team USA that entire run. Sorry, but that's just...
Except the game where the Cardinals took over and had Wainwright and Mikolas kind of pitch the whole entire game and then a big hit by Goldschmidt. But other than that, yeah, I mean, you don't
Phillies all day.
You don't get to that game if it's not for Trey Turner hitting that home run. You get to the finals, and the Phillies players are the only runs. We're the only ones responsible for scoring runs. So I absolutely get your point there.
And look, I'm not gonna lie. I watched every single game that Team USA was a part of, and even some other games, Puerto Rico, the DR. I watched them because it's fun. You're watching MLB All-Stars compete for their country, where it means a little bit. It might even mean a little bit more to them than winning a World Series. Which, obviously, if you're on Team USA, you probably don't think that.
Mm-hmm.
But Manny Machado winning the World Baseball Classic might mean more to him than winning the World Series. And it might be like that for, some guys in Team USA. But for the guys around the other countries, like Shohei Ohtani,
yep.
I mean, I've never seen that dude have emotion, and he was going nuts after he struck out Mike Trout. That 10-pitch at-bat with Kyle Schwarber and Yu Darvish, that was one of the greatest at-bats I've ever seen. The man hit 4 foul ball home runs, and then on the 10th pitch, a 2-2 count, he takes it yard. Not only it doesn't sneak over the wall. He hits a second deck on Yu Darvish for the second time in 6 months. Just the World Baseball Classic was awesome, and
You can ask anyone I was at the bar with there. After that first foul ball, I said a Schwarber home run was a lock, and every time he fouled it off, I was like, "It's a lock, it's a lock." He's going yard again on Darvish, dude. There's no chance he doesn't. And then he hit that moonshot, and it was just like a mic drop. It was like that was the lock of the century. That
yeah,
bat was insane. That bat was insane.
yeah, it was a great tournament. I liked it, even though Team USA didn't win. It was a great tournament, and I really hope that the people that don't like baseball, look, guys, I'm gonna be so honest when I say this. If you do not like baseball, don't watch, because me personally, I don't care about hearing about, oh, the game's too long, oh, nobody cares about the World Baseball Classic, oh, I don't care. Don't say it to me. Don't say it to him. Don't, because we like baseball. Obviously, we've done more Phillies podcasts than any of them. More Phillies than Eagles, and more Phillies than Sixers, and it's enjoyable. And I'm so excited for 6 days from now to be sitting downstairs in my basement and watching a Philadelphia Phillies regular season baseball game. So excited.
Yeah, the vibe you kind of started with there with being baseball guys and everything kind of leads me into my second of three World Baseball Classic takes here. The World Baseball Classic showed that you do not need the pitch clock in the playoffs. I don't mind you having it during the regular season. These are long games. It's a long season. Speed it up. But when you are invested in a baseball game and it is an important baseball game, you do not need to speed up the clock. I did not care how long each one of those pitches took. I was on the edge of my seat for every second of it. That was a long at bat. I don't have the number on it, but that was a long at bat with Kyle Schwarber and Yu Darvish. And the ending of that probably doesn't happen if you're making him throw a pitch within every 20 seconds. So I think it's very clear that, look, the pitch clock was meant to keep people invested during the regular season. It's trying to grow the audience for people who don't necessarily want to sit there for 3 to 4 hours and watch a baseball game. But when you get to the playoffs, you do not need to time these guys, because playoff baseball, meaningful baseball, is a different atmosphere. It is unmatched and it cannot be limited. I need to see this thing out of the playoffs because I do not want to see a Rush World Series game. I want to sit there and enjoy every second of what that atmosphere was.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. Rhys Hoskins bets. I mean, some of the best moments that I've seen live with my own eyes happened in this 2022 World Series run. Rhys Hoskins bat spike home run. I saw that live. I saw the Gene Segura game in against the Padres. I saw, Bryce Harper go back to back. I saw so many things. I saw a Bryce Harper home run in the World Series. I mean, that's something that that's not something that people can say. You watched your favorite player on your favorite team hit the biggest hit in the home in a World Series game. I mean, just baseball's awesome, and if for people that don't like baseball, I don't know what to tell you, but you should open your mind to it a little bit more, because some of the best moments that I've had as a Philly sports fan have come from the Phillies, and those are the memories that I can reflect on and pretty much tell you detail by detail how it happened, who it was against, and what pitch it was, like slider, changeup. Like, I could tell you that because it's just such a clear memory in my head. And yeah, it was only like a few months ago, but you know what I mean. Like, I've seen Embiid do the windmill dunk against the Raptors in Game 6. I can tell you that all about that too. But baseball has created some of my most memorable memories in sports, being a Philly sports fan.
Yeah, baseball's always been my number one. There's certain sports out there that I don't understand how more people don't get invested in. Like, I think hockey is one of the coolest sports out there, and the following it gets is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it is one of the most intense sports out there. Playoff hockey is just another atmosphere. Baseball is one where I kind of understand where it tails off for some people. It was just such an important part of my childhood, and it just kind of isn't. It's America's pastime for me. It's so nostalgic for me, and I love it. But it's one of those where I do understand that some people don't get invested. But hey, it's exciting to see that the game is being grown globally like it was in this tournament. And it's obviously been going on for a little bit, but I think you're going to start seeing it get bigger and bigger over the next coming years. My final World Baseball Classic take is something that I'm actually incredibly passionate about, and I don't think they're going to do, but something they absolutely need to do, because when you look at what everybody has been arguing about, this solves all of those problems. The MLB needs to do, because the MLB is very much responsible for what happens in the World Baseball Classic. The MLB needs to do what the NHL does for the Olympics and crop out 2 weeks in the middle of their season and put the World Baseball Classic right in the middle. Because everyone's sitting here saying, okay, you can't put it at the end because players are going to be tired. Anyone who just went on their playoff run is going to be winded. Anybody who missed the playoffs is already going to have a few months of being off. You can't put it in the middle where that All-Star break is, just because it's not enough time. You can't replace the All-Star game with that. It's not going to work. And you can't put it in the beginning of the season because everybody's butthurt about people getting hurt and pitchers not being ready to go in and take on serious innings. If you slide this right into a 2-week slot in the middle of the season, you do not have a single person arguing about the World Baseball Classic, because there will be nothing to argue about. There's players warmed up. There's players still fresh. It's the perfect thing there, and not a lot of people are thinking about it, but it's exactly what hockey does. They literally take, I don't know how much time they take off, but they take off a lot of time for the Olympics. So if you're trying to make people more interested in the World Baseball Classic, which obviously they're trying to do whatever they can to get more people interested in baseball, you got to throw that thing dead smack in the middle of the summer, because literally nothing will be going on but the World Baseball Classic. Right now, you have March Madness, you got the draft coming up, you got basketball, you got hockey. There's everything in the world going on. If you throw this thing right in the middle of the summer, you will have everybody tuning in for these games. And I think if you're trying to grow that tournament, you're trying to grow baseball, that's the perfect time to do it.
Yeah, that's actually something I haven't even thought about. But yeah, you're right. I mean, look how much stuff is going on right now. You had March Madness the entirety of the time that it was going on. You have a playoff push in basketball and hockey. Full game guys. You know, breaking records, and you have McDavid in hockey scoring 60 goals, and you have Embiid in basketball averaging 33, and finally taking that from Jokic in the MVP race as of now. You have the NFL draft, you have NFL free agency, you have so much stuff going on right now. The PGA Tour's coming up soon. Like, you just have too much going on. And if you have baseball during baseball season, but
Crazy
you take
thought.
these guys off their, what happened?
I said crazy thought, having baseball during baseball season.
Yeah, right. Like, everything else is during that season. But yeah, I agree with your point. I haven't thought about it like that, but that
Yeah,
would be it. Hockey does it.
yeah. I mean, the last 2 games I was at the bar. Tell me why I'm sitting there watching these giant games. I'm watching Japan versus Mexico while staring at the TV next to it, watching the Sixers play the Bulls in a meaningless game. Then the next night, I'm watching the championship of the World Baseball Classic, and then looking at the TV over, and there's Flyers. There needs to be all attention on this tournament, because it is a big deal. It is a big deal for baseball, just like I mentioned the World Classic, the World Cup is a big deal for soccer fans. Just why the Olympics is a big deal for hockey fans. This stuff is so important for baseball, and I think throwing it in the middle spring training, you have people's attention divided. You have players that don't want to join because they're afraid of getting hurt, which, yeah, you're always going to run that risk of getting hurt, but it's more so an injury risk for a pitcher who hasn't gotten their load up. These pitchers are coming in pitching 2 innings max, maybe 3 in a spring training game. They're not going to go over and pitch in the World Baseball Classic. Yes, that was a relatively low scoring game in the championship, but the U.S.'s top 10 pitchers were not in that classic because nobody wants to run the risk of getting hurt. I think you will see a significant change in the players that are willing to go in and play in this tournament if you slide this into a 2-week slot in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a good point.
Thank you.
But is there anything else you wanted to hit on?
nothing big from the Phillies. I mean, we talked about Trey Turner and how amazing he's been. If he's able to, I've always personally seen him as a guy who can put the ball out of the ballpark. His numbers don't necessarily show it to a dramatic extent, but I one of the home runs I watched him hit in that series with the Dodgers in the playoffs last year. I mean, dude, he just crushed the ball, and I was like, this is a guy where, like he mentioned it, he just if he sees the ball, dude, he's gonna put it out of the ballpark. He's not a guy who's going out there trying to hit home runs, but I can see him coming in and hitting a big home run for the Phillies in a playoff run. So if they can get this guy hitting power, there gone goes the argument of wanting Schwarber in the leadoff because he can hit home runs. Cool. Guess who can do it now? The best shortstop in the world. So I'm really excited to see if he's able to translate that power over into the regular season. I mean, hell, he went into the very next game in spring training and hit one. So he's obviously not cooling down. Need opening day to get here faster if it can. But yeah, that what a huge tournament for him. And hopefully we see the same from the rest of those guys who were able to perform in that tournament.
Yeah, very excited. Phillies baseball starts in 6 days to basically the hour when we're recording this. It's 2:47 right now, and I'm pretty sure our first game's at like 3:05 in Texas. So, man, I can't believe it's already baseball season, but I am very excited. Took a little bit of a bump in the road there with Rhys Hoskins, but I'm sure everything will get figured out. At least we do got some good news about Bryce Harper and his camp, working things up and, you know, good stuff and bad stuff. It is Philly, so you got to expect the good to come with the bad. But
Hey, it's the name of the game. I mean, I said it at the top. You're kind of waiting for this stuff. Sometimes when everything's going well, it's too good to be true. This kind of stuff's going to happen, but I think Dave Dombrowski has built a team that is able to overcome something like this. I mean, it sucks to say that I'm not too worried about him going down because how important he is, but I'm not because I think we have the players around in this clubhouse to overcome something like this. So I'm excited to see what Rob Thompson kind of lines up with these guys and ultimately how they end up performing once the season starts.
yeah, and obviously, if you guys are new, still watching, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to both of our channels. We'll definitely be doing a lot more Phillies videos. We're working on some stuff right now to, hopefully make the content a little bit better because I understand. Look, nobody wants to just watch two people talking for an hour. But we're working on some stuff, and if you stick with us for the long haul, trust it will be worth your time. Because very two big, passionate sports fans, especially in the Philly area. So if that's it, you got anything else to say?
No, that's been all my thoughts. There's been a lot of Eagles stuff going on lately, and then Hoskins getting hurt kind of drew me right back into the Phils.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I am 444 Philly fan. That is Tim Talks Philly. Make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. Links will be in the descriptions below. They'll be on both of our channels, by the way. So, again, with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe to both channels. We're out.
talk to you
Peace.
guys later.